it seems like Diet Dodongo's Cavern is a good way to put it.
Is there a lot of nasty...
Dodongo's Cavern Light.
There are a lot of nasty chemicals in there we have to worry about? You know about
It's
the joke.
more of... Yeah, I got you. But to explain it more, I felt like Dodongo's Cavern...
Okay, so the first dungeon up is the Dodongo's Cavern, which is the last child dungeon from the Ocarina of Time. So, anyways...
Oh, isn't this the second?
Yeah, this is only the second. So, what's kind of funny with the Dodongo's Cavern for me, just kind of over the years, is that it's kind of a mellow type of place to me. Like, when it comes to the Earth Temple, like from Wind Waker, is that it's kind of the environment that kind of does it for me when I go through a place like this. Like, there aren't any huge puzzles or anything. It's a nice introduction. It's a nice step up from the Great Deku Tree. But for me, I just love the environment. Just kind of going through this place. It's a really calming place. I probably placed it around number 20. I really like this place.
I really liked when you first go in and you place the bomb and you explode the wall and you just get to see first impressions, the large Dodongo head in the background, the wide area, and you get the impression that this is something beyond what the Deku Tree had to offer. There are a lot of different paths you could go in this one as well, and the enemies, though nothing too difficult, did step it up in their game and were more aggressive than the fairly passive enemies found in the Deku Tree.
Yeah, just like that laser the guy that you see like after you go past the
yes,
first
the
couple
Beamos.
platforms.
He gave me a lot of stress as a child during my first impressions because it was, well, first of all, I was used to A Link to the Past where you couldn't kill Beamos, so I tried my best to avoid them, but time went by and I came to the realization that enough, you could destroy them with bombs. So it did make things a lot less hectic in that aspect.
Yeah, and then I remember with the little laser humming, I remember that scared me as a kid when I went through the first time. I was like, ugh, this little thing's just like chasing me. And then a big thing for me, like just kind of what stands it out from compared to the other child dungeons for me, is the Lizalfos. I remember seeing them, and I think they're like the best mini bosses to me, in my opinion, when it comes to the child dungeons. Like the Great Deku Tree, it technically doesn't have one, and the third one, you know.
Yeah, it's mundane. The Lizalfos are a very unique and interesting mini boss.
Like they kind of taught you how to be a little bit offensive and a little bit defensive. Of course, if you're a pro at the game, then you can just go stab, 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 and they die. Of course.
Right. So long as you time your strikes with their jumps.
And just like I remember the first time when I came across the Lizalfos, like just the fact that they like jumped over your head and like caught you off surprise. It's like, holy cow, what the heck is this guy doing? Like it kind of swerves the camera in a way that you haven't really seen it before. I remember that part like impressing me when I was going through it the first time.
The second fight really builds upon it because there's actually a lot less room for you and the Lizalfos. And there's even like that one large arch that goes over the previous arena where you fought them.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It's kind of like a tutorial in itself, is that there's the first fight where there's more barriers, and if you screw up, you can easily get back. Whereas in the second fight, if you screw up, you do have to make your way all the way back.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So there's less room for mistakes. The bombs were implemented just fine, and there were none of the puzzles were too easy, but then again, none of them were really difficult. I found it was a very decent standard dungeon, and for the child dungeons, I'd definitely say it's my favorite. No question.
Definitely. For me personally, like I put the child dungeons, like the second one and the third one, just for me personally, is that I like the Dodongo's Cavern and the Lord Jabu Jabu's Belly for me. Around the same. Like I put this one at number 20. I put Lord Jabu Jabu's Belly at number 19. I just kind of feel like they're both around the same. Is that it doesn't really go like out of boundaries or anything like it does with the adult temples or with a lot of other dungeons that I'd probably compare it to. But I think just the environment and just it's a nice increment upwards, just with the puzzles, and it didn't keep safe or anything with the Great Deku Tree. It kept going forward.
Yeah, one of the things I did like about both the Deku Tree and Dodongo's Cavern was how it all came full circle. You kind of begin at the center of the room, and the boss is basically at the center of the room. With the Deku Tree, it's that web. There's a whole second floor, and then you make your way down another layer into Goma's lair. With Dodongo's cavern, there's the center room. You make your way to the left flank and the right flank, then you meet in the center and you bomb them out. You bomb the eyes and the mouth opens, and you enter the King Dodongo's chamber. So it's very nice how, like, it's not just a straight path, it all kind of wraps around.
Yeah.
And the boss is, like, pretty much dead center.
Yeah.
Jabu Jabu's belly was more linear. You start at the beginning of the whale. Baronade is more towards the end of the whale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I remember the last part just kind of impressing me about Dodongo's Cavern. I'd probably say this is probably the star puzzle out of the 3 dungeons. It's just how you kind of drop the bombs onto the eyes. I remember going through that as a kid, and I was like, what the heck do you do here? Like, I remember just bombing the end, and you get, like, bombs or something. I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? And then it took me a moment. I'd probably say about 10 minutes to figure that one out. I'd probably say, for me personally, that's the hardest puzzle.
I liked that bit, and I liked when you're in the chamber right before you fight King Dodongo, and you have to swing around and find a block. Like, you'd expect the block to be in the room with all the fire keys, but it's not. You have to make your way around and kind of work your way towards, and then open the door.
Oh, I remember.
Like, really exploring and going outside of your boundaries.
I remember
and,
that.
It was interesting, even though it was quite simplistic. Bombing pretty much the staircase to function. And I mean, there was even a cinematic to it with the staircase slowly rising and working to where, you can kind of make your way to the next layer now. It had a good presentation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the music, though simple, I think was effective.
Yeah, it is. It kind of reminds me of that I'm like in an oven of sorts. It kind of fit the whole Death Mountain theme a little bit. It was very subtle, but it was very effective. Kind of the same way with the, in my opinion, the Great Deku Tree with the Lord Jabu Jabu's belly. It just fit how it was supposed to work. The
child dungeons are more towards atmosphere, and they don't really have a melody. The melody comes in more towards the adult temples.
Yeah, where they kind of use more complicated instruments.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next dungeon that we have here is rank number 27, which is the Sky Keep from Skyward Sword, and this one's like tossed all over the place, like just in interpretations. I'd probably say this is the dungeon that it could just go anywhere, just for any Zelda players. That it depends on.
Yeah, it has its ups and it has its downs. I do like the mechanic. I just don't think it was explored well enough.
You don't think so?
No, I think it was over too quickly, to be honest. Like, you have the different rooms and you can rearrange it, and then once you have that you fight the room filled with enemies, and I think there's like a couple more rooms, and then you fight a reskinned mini-boss, which I wasn't too impressed with. Because I think his name's Scarvo, but I liked him better on the ship because he was his own thing. Mm-hmm. Having him here just didn't I wasn't too fond of it.
Yeah. I didn't actually rank this one too high. I'd probably rank it somewhere around the middle or something, as I don't think it really took it too far or something. I thought the music was it was somewhat decent. And
yeah, it was okay. I thought it was better than Wind Waker, but not as good as it could have been. Like, I really like the concept about how the first room you go in kind of rearranges these rooms and how the puzzle kind of sets itself and how each challenge is going to be. And you really have to sort of do like this, not a block puzzle. They have a specific name, like one of those slide puzzles.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The 1 through 9 grid, and you have to like slide the numbers around into the empty space and.
Exactly, so it all fits. That's cool. I think they could have done a lot more with it, but they kind of play it safe and says, this is the concept. We don't want to overstay our welcome. Let's get through with this.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that they were kind of. I think that's kind of my biggest complaint about it, is that it doesn't really introduce any new enemies. It doesn't introduce any new items or any new obstacles that you haven't seen yet, like up to that point. It just kind of felt like it was just kind of a rush mode through, get through this room, get through this room, get through this room, and then.
Well, it's interesting because the finale of Skyward Sword itself really works, and technically you really don't need a final dungeon. It seemed like they wanted a final dungeon just for the sake of having one.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point. I wonder if the Sky Keep was even necessary at all. Like, I think it's kind of one of those concepts where, if it's going to go with the concept, it might have taken it a bit further. But if it's something this, I wouldn't call it mediocre or something, then they might as well just not do it at all.
Well, It could have been a lot worse, but it could have been a lot better. Again, it didn't anger me. I was just like, oh, this is pretty cool. Oh, wait, that's it?
Yeah, it's just kind of like they got the fuel to the fire going, but it didn't quite light the match.
Like when I was fighting the mini-boss, I thought I was about halfway through. To discover that was pretty much the ending was just a, whoa. That threw me for a loop.
And then all of a sudden you're in this horde battle and you're fighting your way over towards Girahim.
Yeah, these Zelda final dungeons, they're either fairly decent or just downright terrible. I don't think they know how to nail them.
Yeah, it just feels like with Ocarina of Time, which did it with the first 3D. And Majora's Mask, I remember going to the moon, and that's probably the one, in my opinion, where I think they kind of did it the worst. Is that
Majora's Mask was just with the moon was just kind of
that
like
one?
they were more like obstacle course. It felt more like an extended side quest than the finale.
Yeah, yeah.
To wrap it all together.
I remember like going into each of those 4 things, and I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else from experience, but it just felt really tacked on and just kind of last minute. They said that they want to play hide and seek with you, and then you find these kids or something, and then all of a sudden it's over. It's just like, well, why put that there in the first place? And that's where, in my opinion, I think Skykeep just kind of does it a little bit better.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's just like there's actually an objective for you to go towards. It gives you a plain and simple objective. Is that it gives you just a few rooms to maneuver around in, and it's a little bit of something to play with. It also makes me wonder if maybe it could be for the best for some Zelda players because it didn't go hardcore with it to confuse some Zelda players, like it could have done with the Water Temple or the Lake Bed Temple, that sort of thing. Do you think that's true, or do you think that they should have just pushed it, done it a little bit better?
Just a little push, but honestly, I'm kind of sick of the let's reuse bits and pieces of the previous dungeons for our final dungeon. I'm ready for something new. I think it's one of many reasons why I sort of appeal to Hyrule Castle and Twilight Princess.
It feels like
it's a beast of its own, but it's not, here's bits and pieces of the other dungeons you traversed. You're still using all the items you've used, but you're not really going through similar rooms. Like, I think that was done best in Ocarina of Time, and they just need to quit replicating that.
Yeah, it just kind of took its own branch and just kind of went with it. And it makes sense, though, too, with Twilight Princess. It's more of a cinematic game, so it's more of something where you kind of take in the environment. And it kind of fit that atmosphere. Each Zelda game has their own thing that they go for. I mean, with Twilight Princess, it's you have the wolf, you're going through these dark worlds, so that game is supposed to be all about what you're taking in with your atmosphere. And with Skyward Sword, it has to come back to the motion controls a little bit, and it just kind of what it expands on from there to kind of give it that conclusive end. And it's kind of weird. Like, I guess that's kind of where I'm kind of glad that they didn't do that in the last dungeon, is that they didn't really do anything like motion control related. They just kind of kept to something just familiar ground the entire time. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's one of those dungeons where you wonder if they would have done this, or if it might have been for the better or for the worst, or that they should have kept it out where it's at, just simply because it could have been worse if they did something different about it. I don't know, it's an interesting thing. To me, I'd probably say it's the most interesting final dungeon to talk about.
It is interesting, but I think if it just lasted maybe 10 minutes longer, I'd put it higher on my scale.
Yeah, just how long was it for you? Was it like 15 minutes, 20 minutes for you?
I don't know.
I don't know, I kind of lost track.
I haven't played Skyward Sword since it was released.
Yeah, that kind of goes for me too. Is I played it once and a little bit of twice, but I don't know. Kind of lost track of my time. Just kind of wonder if it might be different if we go through it again. Or
I probably will.
Yeah, like Joe and I know Joe has played through Twilight Princess only once or something, and you know when you go back through these Zelda games again, things kind of change for you. Like for example, with the Wind Temple from Wind Waker a little bit. At first I hated that dungeon on my first playthrough, and then I went back through it on my second playthrough, and I just started getting into it. I started getting into the music, started getting into the puzzles, and I just overall started to like it a lot more. I wonder if the same thing would have happened if I did the Skykeep from Skyward Sword. But to me, though, I've kind of seen the concept. I've already seen what it is, so it's kind of hardened down into the cement what it kind of means for me at that point. So I think it's kind of middle for me. What do you think?
Yeah, middle's a good spot for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that it didn't take it too far, but it's a decent concept. At least it did something. So. Alright, so we have rank number 26 next, which is the Snowhead Temple from Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
You probably heard it from my part 2 when I was talking about this, is that my first time when I went through this place, like, you know when you have to raise the platform all the way to the ceiling and you start knocking out the pieces from it one by one? When I was going through it as a kid for my first time, I'd probably say I was around like 11, maybe 12 or something at the time. I thought at first that those were part of the platform's decoration, so I didn't think to actually hit those out when I first saw it or something. And I know that Tattle was like telling me like, oh, knock the platform out, knock the platform out. I was like, I don't see how I can. And I never really used a Goron ability where you really punch things out of the platform or any obstacles or something out of that point. So I was like, or not too much. So I was like, punch what out? Like, I don't think Gorons are supposed to punch anything out or something like that. And I've had to retry that dungeon probably about 6 times, and that was when I rage quitted from it. Is that it was a pretty decent burn. It's just like I appreciate the Snowhead Temple for what it's trying to do. It's probably my favorite out of the 4 because it uses a lot of logic and a lot of thinking, and which is what I appreciate it for puzzle-wise. But I don't know, like
it has some good puzzles, but it's very tedious for me.
Oh, what was it
about? Very rinse and repeat, like that center totem and something, and so on, and just doing those. It's such a mundane dungeon for me. I always feel like it's just a trek uphill through snow, like that old story your grandfather would tell you. Only this time it's an actual Zelda dungeon.
Yeah, just kind of like that mountain, or I guess from the game Journey, I guess you just kind of keep hiking upwards. Except Journey's kind of a different case. That's more of a cinematic approach. This is more of a, you're closed into this place, now what are you going to do about it?
I mean, there were nice puzzles, and I mean, the mini-bosses. I remember the Wizrobe. What was the other mini-boss? For Snowhead.
I don't think it has another mini-boss, does it?
Really? I thought all Majora's Mask mini-bosses came in sets of 2.
Yeah, that's right. You only fight, like, Wizrobe. Oh, you fight Wizrobe twice.
Well, that's dumb. Okay, so yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You do it even more.
At first, you do it in a small square room, and then there's a second one where it kind of branches out, and then I think there's like a platform or two to give it a little bit of variance. And I remember you get the boss key after that.
Oh, so it's Dodongo's Cavern again. We're gonna do this mini boss, and then we're gonna do it again. Only we're gonna expand a bit. You're better than that in Majora's Mask.
Except I hated Wizrobe, especially how I repeated him probably about 6 times throughout the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like seeing him in.
You fight him a lot.
I remember seeing him in Stowe Tower Temple. I was like, okay. That's enough. You're breaking my legs here. Just stop it. No, seriously, like this mini boss is done like 6 times. It's like, give it a rest already.
Yeah, they were a lot cooler in Wind Waker.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with like making mini bosses again. Like I remember those Wizrobes from the Wind Waker. Those were fine. And those guys with the swords, I forgot what they were called. Dark Nuts, I think?
Dark Nuts, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're going through like the 100 floor thing with that.
Well, they became standard enemies, and they were more combat-based, whereas in Majora's Mask, Wizrobe is sort of puzzle-based.
Yeah,
so when you repeat that kind of enemy multiple times, it gets monotonous. And that's just how I like to sum up Snowhead in a simple word, is monotonous.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem for me, another big complaint, is that sometimes, well, it didn't happen often.
And like if you miss your jump with the Goron rolling and stuff,
you have to
start quite a ways back.
Yep, there's no shortcuts, no elevators, no nothing. You have to hike all the way back up from the bottom to from where the lava origins are. Something like that. All it takes
is one little nudge or one enemy to hit you.
Yeah, I just felt like, other than that rising pillar, like to encourage a little bit of thinking, I feel like it didn't have a really whole lot going for it, for me, in my opinion. Is that, otherwise it's just kind of tedious to get to places, and I don't know, it's a weird one to talk about, like, generally.
No, it isn't. I can talk clearly about it. It's monotonous. I'm not shy of that. It's a very boring dungeon for me.
It's just kind of one of those things for me where I've had a lot of bad memories from it just from my first walkthrough, and it's kind of one of those dungeons for me. It's really hard for me to stay objective about it because there's that part of me that wants to be objective, but there's that side of me that's just like, I've just been scarred too badly just with what's been happening to me with the past. You've had those kind of experiences before, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it was mostly just like I said with Woodfall. It took forever for this one to pick up for me. And when I finally got to Woodfall, I was like, here we go. Things are getting nice. Things are no longer mundane. What's the next dungeon? Mundane. What was the following dungeon? Horrible. What was the last dungeon? We'll get to that.
It's kind of interesting. It does bring up a point, though, is that I hear some Majora's Mask players and saying that these are probably like the best dungeons or something like out of the series. And just something I've heard from their side.
2 of them.
Or maybe I guess
it's not a good grade in my book.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of more like a viewpoint or which type of game that you just happen to be into. Like for me, it's Twilight Princess, so
that's a preference.
Yeah. So for me, I'd be more biased towards like Twilight Princess.
All other Zeldas have more dungeons that are a lot better, and it's sad because Majora only has 4, so you'd think it would have 4 strong dungeons, but not to me. It has 2.
Do you think if Majora's Mask would be a lot better game if it had more than 4 dungeons?
I think it would be a little more engaging, but I don't know. It's kind of its own thing. It would kind of go against its own like built-in mechanic. It's just when I play it and go back to it, and I see these dungeons again, and there's the one I love and the ones I hate, and then you realize that's all this has to offer. And the side quests are give or take for me, they really are, but that's a whole other topic entirely. Like, I know that this game is all side quests, and that's fine, but some of these side quests I downright despise. But again, that's another time. We're not here to talk about the side quests.
Yeah,
we're not here to rag on Majora's Mask.
But I guess the last argument to kind of bring up is that some Majora's Mask players, I know there's some viewers out there that are probably going to ask this, but do you think quality over quantity is really the best way to go about with these dungeons? Because, it takes a long time to really get through it. Oh, some of them
the quality's in the eye of the beholder in these ones, but I think goes both ways. You got some that really... You can tell they take the time to make a really good dungeon because they're so few and far between. And then you got some that just have a very bad mechanic, and no matter how well they're crafted environment-wise, they're just not enjoyable to play.
Okay, so it simply comes down to the quality of the dungeon. It's nothing about it being condensed down into 4 dungeons and having to have more stuff or something. That's the problem.
That's what I believe, yeah.
Yeah, so it just boils down to we've been through it. We've experienced it for ourselves, and both of us, like personally, like for Joe, he's the only one that actually put this in really high marks. I think around number 6, I think. But the rest of us were just like, I think you could have done better. Okay, so number 25. This is something that both of us can rage on: the Fire Sanctuary from Skyward Sword.
This is the part where I do more than the last part, and the last part was supposedly worse dungeons.
And
explain this to me.
Both of us put this into our 30s, like into our bottom 5. Both of us just despise this dungeon from start to end.
It's funny because this is the only Skyward Sword dungeon that I just don't like. Like, Skyward Sword has a lot of really good dungeons, and we'll get to them, but this is not one of them. I think the biggest hurt for Fire Sanctuary is when it comes to the second set of dungeons, as I like to call it, from the forest region, the fire region, the desert region. It feels like the forest and desert are different environments, a new take on that standard trend, whereas this one is just another fire dungeon.
Yeah, they just kind of slapped it on
and
there.
There's not much new in there. I think there's like very long-winded water... try to make platforms on lava, which was done sparingly in Wind Waker, and I think that was done okay. But this one's done to like a large extreme. And the mini-boss was interesting, the kind of magma hands. That was something new, because all throughout that dungeon, I really wasn't seeing anything new.
Right.
And it really boils down to it's just not a very memorable dungeon because it's like, I've seen this. We already had a fire dungeon before. And again, I can't count the boss fight.
Yeah,
and I really like all 3 Girahim boss fights.
And that one
because there's sort of a story there.
Right. For me though, the reason I put it at number 30 for me personally is that I think this is probably the most disappointing dungeon I've ever come across. Just all throughout my Zelda adventures is just like I kind of came in.
We already talked about that one, but go on.
But this for me is probably the most disappointing dungeon that I've ever come across, and just when it comes to its potential, it felt like I was just kind of making platforms, and it just kind of felt like a lava ride, and I just felt like most of the time
standing in the shadow, and I know you don't agree with this, but it was standing in the shadow of the sand ship and the ancient cistern, and it seemed like it almost didn't want to be noticed. Like, those were dungeons that thought outside the box and offered something new and fresh while still giving you familiar elements. Dungeons that you really never played before, whether you like them or hate them, they were something different. Fire Sanctuary was more of same old, same old. Here's another fire dungeon.
It just kind of felt like they just slapped it there and just said, okay, here's more of the same. And going back to what you were saying about the Dragon Roost Cavern and saying it was like Diet Dodongo's Cavern or something.
Yeah, this is Diet Fire Temple.
This is pretty much like stretching it out to the point of, I don't know, just completely watered down, filtered out gunk. For me personally, is that, I understand where Joe and Jitten are probably come from and saying that when it comes to, like, skydiving or something, like from the top or something, or like landing on those crystal platforms and going into,
2 seconds, wee!
Yeah, and then there's like those moments where you got those gloves and things that you can start burrowing under the ground into those like Pac-Man puzzles. And I remember seeing those, and I'm like, well, they're not exactly revolutionary in what I would expect in a 3D Zelda game, you know?
They're just few and far between. They're nice aspects, but hell, even the Earth Temple was more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the ball to roll on. And I don't know why that's really entertaining, but for some reason it's really entertaining.
The ball, the Magmars, not Magmars, what are they called? Magors? The mole guys. That could be the ball bag.
I'm bad with Zelda lore when it comes to...
I'm usually pretty good. It's the Skyward Sword ones that I kind of get lost on.
Right. Just for me, just like Fire Sanctuary, it just felt like it was just slapped on, and I don't know what else to say about it. Like, I know everybody has their own opinions, and of course Joe and Jitten are on the other side of the scale. They got this close into their top 10, so obviously it has to mean a lot to them in some respect, but this is just me speaking from my own experiences, is that I just can't really get behind that viewpoint, is that I just felt like I was just jogging half the time, and the item was just rarely used, and then that sky jump thing, we've done that before, like... You know, like when
there's a chance that when I revisit Skyward Sword, I might like it more now that I'm no longer have the wow factor of the other 2 dungeons. Because this was the last one that I did.
Right.
Out of those 3, I did Ancient Cistern, Sand Ship, and then this one. So this one was kind of whoops. It was like way to kill my buzz, way to kill the motor.
Yeah, it's just like you got this momentum thing going, and then all of a
sudden
it
and it kind of like deflated me a bit. And then with the Sky Keep, it was a little better, and then luckily, like, the finale was like, pew, skyrocketed.
Yeah, especially with the Girahim and Demise, I guess.
Yeah, just the finale in general, from the moment Zelda gets captured to the ending credit song, I was in awe.
Yeah.
And it was a shame because I had to go through the Fire Sanctuary and stuff like that to get there. And even non-dungeon things like collecting tadpoles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, for me, just, I don't know, just more like a lava ride, I suppose.
A lackluster fire dungeon. We've seen them before. We've seen good fire dungeons. This is a fairly lackluster one.
Yep, and everyone to their own opinions, and we don't disrespect anybody out there who loves the Fire Sanctuary, but for me and Warren, it just didn't do it for us. And I'm just one of those guys who just likes to speak my heart, so... Got anything else to say about it?
No, I'm good.
Alright. Rank number 24 is the Wind Temple from Wind Waker. Now this one kind of a little bit of a background is that Joe and Jitten, they thought that this one was pretty bad. Me and you, I think you put it at number 9, something where like that, and I put it at number 15. So both of us had a very decent, fun time with this one.
It had some good bits. I liked the music. I liked how you used Makar. And he was less of, because obviously we weren't going to have another offensive. That was your job. So we had someone on a either defensive or puzzle, and he's sort of like the nurturer, and he kind of grows things so you can access different areas. Wind Temple is a bit confusing, but it does have the more interesting puzzles.
Yeah, it does.
And I do like how you use the leaf. There's never too many times when you can use the leaf. You not only use the leaf, you use the hook shot, you use the iron boots, you use your arrows. I mean, it really put a lot of your arsenal to good use, which is what a good dungeon should do, not just cater to the dungeon you get, the item you get in that dungeon.
Right. To me though, like this has kind of replaced the Ganon's Tower for me a little bit. Is that it's kind of the last dungeon before you head up to the Ganon's Tower.
Yeah.
But for me though, this kind of felt more like the final dungeon for me. Is that you've got a lot of items to use, and then you got to watch things. It was a
good ultimate test because now you have all the tools. Go at it.
And you got to watch things like for your magic meter, like when it comes to the deck you leaf, and you have to watch and see. You have to plan things out a little bit, like when it comes to Makar, when you get into these sections, and then there's definitely a lot. It's a complicated layout too. I mean. Sometimes...
And the floor masters are a lot more aggressive towards Makar than they ever were with Medley.
Yeah, I remember that.
They want to just snatch him and take him to a place where it's like, oh god, let me check my map. There he is.
Poor guy. That guy gets into a lot of trouble.
I did feel bad for it. And that was another thing that kind of helped with the Wind Waker. With the Earth Temple, I felt like Medley and I were a team. There weren't that many times when she was in trouble. Whereas with the Wind Temple, I felt like I was protecting this little guy.
Yeah, he's so
I
tiny.
felt like, hold on, little buddy. I'm going to help you through this. You and me. It was kind of like Luke carrying Yoda through the swamps.
Yeah, just and it helps you to
stick with me, buddy. I'll help you. And it made me feel heroic because you get floor masters, and I'd be like, you stay away from him, and I'd whip him with a spin attack. You felt heroic, which is a really good feeling to come from Zelda games.
Because Link is a hero.
Exactly. You want to feel the sense of accomplishment when you're like, I solved that dungeon and I didn't use a guide. You want to feel that sense of awe, like when the boss has its cinematic and it appears and you're just like, oh damn, this looks intimidating. You want to feel heroic when you help something out or conquer a very annoying enemy. And I feel like the Wind Temple does that quite well. And again, the dungeons are nothing the puzzles are nothing to scoff at.
Right. And like for me, that's kind of the biggest fulfillment I get from it is that my number one entry that I picked was the Lakebed Temple from Twilight Princess, because that was confusing. It's a little hard. I love hard dungeons for me personally. Is that I felt like with the Wind Temple they kind of pushed you a little bit and saying,
yes,
oh, you know what, you're gonna get lost here for a little bit, and that's how I like to feel in dungeons, because
especially the last one, I want you to kind of like throw some nasty punches and be like, come on, I want you to work for that finale, because especially thinking back, Ganon's Tower does not have me work for that finale, so it's nice that at least the dungeon before that did.
Yeah. And this is kind of the only down point for me, like from the dungeon. It's the reason I kind of ranked it just a little bit low. I'd still consider number 15 really good. Is that Makar was just a little bit finicky to control at points, especially when he started getting into trouble. Like when you're trying to dodge enemies, or if he starts getting hit a lot, or he just starts getting cornered by enemies a little bit, and then he gets a little bit. I don't know. He's just a little bit weird for me to control.
I didn't run into too many problems because it was obvious that I had to clear the room, keep him next to the doorway, and then take control. Because if I was, like, even if I would fly, I could be so far away from that enemy, he would see me.
That's actually what I did on my second playthrough. I played Wind Waker probably about maybe three times. started doing that on my second playthrough, and then it was kind of after that I started to kind of grow more attached to the dungeon. Like my first time when I played Wind Waker, I absolutely hated the Wind Temple. Like the song for me was terrible. Makar was terrible. I was younger then. I was a child. You know, we're all stupid when we're children. But
it happens to the best of us. So besides Makar and the puzzles themselves, I really liked the mini-boss as well because it was an advanced version of the Wizrobes. And if you weren't careful, things would get pretty hectic because it wasn't spawning the Moblins and the Darknuts anytime soon. And not only that, we had to find them itself. But overall, I think it was a grand final dungeon, since I found the actual final dungeon to be lacking. A great challenge, especially now that you had all the items up to this point. And overall, just a good cap off a fairly decent Zelda game.
Yeah, I agree. And well, with Forbidden Woods, I guess we'll get to that later. But for both of us, Wind Temple, definitely a thumbs up from both of us. Okay, so number 23. What is next is going to be the Fire Temple from Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
So this is where we're going to stand on different sides of the fences here. Is that I rank this as my favorite Ocarina of Time dungeon. You know, opinions. They kind of fly all over the place depending on the person. And I actually put it in my number 10 spot. This is my favorite, with the Spirit Temple being in second place. And with you, Warren, I think you put it pretty low. I think you put it around like number 27. Yeah, you put it at number 28. Yeah, you put it at number 28. So we got quite a decent different viewpoints on this dungeon.
Keep in mind, I don't really hate this dungeon. I do like that there's sort of a story behind this one with the Gorons and Volvagia and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest disappointments, though, is you kind of get the Megaton Hammer at the end.
Right.
And you use it like twice, and then you face the boss. And then you rarely use the Megaton Hammer again at all. And the Megaton Hammer is a cool item. I just think it could have been used a lot more.
Yeah.
As for the dungeon itself, it's mostly about freeing the Gorons, and it's a nice concept. But there's about like 9 or 10 Gorons that you're freeing, and the puzzles themselves rarely go beyond that.
Yeah, it feels like it's just a straight walkthrough with the dungeon. This is my personal opinion, is that I think out of all of the dungeons, I think the Fire Temple is the easiest one to go through.
It is. It truly is.
Just in terms of, there isn't really anything that stops you, like other than that boulder maze and probably like a fire trap or two, but
yeah,
otherwise...
the fire maze with the fires that spread out and you got to watch where you're stepping. I think that was the only thing that gave me trouble. Everything else was fairly simple. And because it's controversial, I really liked the original Fire Temple theme. But because they changed it, it lost something for me.
Really? Was there like an original Fire Temple tune?
Yes, there was. You never knew this? In the original Nintendo 64, the Fire Temple had an original theme with Muslim chanting. Chanting was offensive.
Gotcha.
So they took it out and changed it slightly.
I thought you were like talking some kind of beta test or something I didn't know about.
No. No, I'm talking about the controversial one. And I'm not going to talk about controversies, but just as a listener, it was pleasing for me and it added to the environment. It was like some kind of like unknown hell, the belly of a dragon. Like a beast sleeps here. And that kind of added to it. And when the song was removed, and I didn't know about the controversy at that time, the song was removed when I later played it on the GameCube. I was like, what happened here? Where'd this song go?
So, like, what happened to the song in the GameCube version? So I'm completely new to this. Like, what's with the whole controversy with this thing?
Because they found it a distaste of like Muslim culture, so they just wanted it removed. And there's a huge story behind it, but it mostly just goes back to, at the time, Nintendo didn't know, and once they realized that it was offensive, they pulled the plug and removed that track, and it was never seen in another re-release. It's not in the 3DS remake, it's not in the GameCube versions, it's not on the Virtual Console. It's only on the original gold cartridge Nintendo 64. That's the only place you'll find the original song. All the other ones are replaced with hums very similar to the Shadow Temples, which I think are more befitting for the Shadow Temple, whereas the chants are perfect for the Fire Temple.
Right. So
I'm not trying to
I own
sound
the
prejudiced or ignorant. I really don't want to come off as that. I just think musically, it adds to the environment. It adds to the area.
right. So if I own a silver cartridge Ocarina of Time, I wouldn't hear this.
Right, correct. You would
Oh,
not.
then that means I've never heard it.
Okay, then you'd have to listen to it online. It's definitely online.
Oh, I guess you learn something new every day, I guess.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
So yeah, when the song was removed, I felt the temple as a whole lost something. And revisiting it even to now, I feel like it's quiet, too quiet. Where's the music? Why is it so very subtle?
Right.
Like there's kind of a sense of foreboding.
Uh-huh.
Like a sleeping dragon, like something lives here, something lurks here. And like you hear these chants and like it would be perfect because you go through these doors and it would like swell up and it would get louder and it would get quiet and it would get louder.
It kind of reminds me of something like from Eastern culture or something, like something with I guess with the mythology and with the dragons and things. It's kind of something I've heard.
That was one of the things that I really liked about Ocarina of Time as a whole was each of those temples had like a different mythology, a different theme, a different style. And the new Fire Temple music was too similar to the Shadow Temple style. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of awkward for me.
Right.
But it boils down to I was okay with the Flame Dancer as a mini boss. I thought he was kind of cool and pretty interesting, visually appealing, definitely. But the lack of use of the Megaton Hammer, the fact that it's fairly easy and straightforward, and that you lose a sense of atmosphere by changing the track. And again, I can't count the boss.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, Volvagia is a really cool boss.
I like Volvagia as a boss, and I like the story behind her.
Mm-hmm. But it feels like the dungeon just kind of keeping that in its own perspective. Yeah, it just didn't do it for you.
You feel responsible when you start out because you see Darunia there, and he's like, "I'm gonna go tame this dragon. Please save my people." And you get like this big task, and you're like, "I'll do it. I'll shoulder this responsibility." And there's moments where you feel triumphant, but as a whole with the dungeon, it's just missed opportunity.
I guess to explain why I love this dungeon so much is that I played Ocarina of Time like over and over and over and over again.
And it's your fault.
Yeah, that's my fault, of course. Many people wanted to see me beat it, and it's one of those things where you come across those groups of people where they're like, "Oh, you've never beaten Ocarina of Time or something," and then I said, I have," and then they want to see the whole game through, and then
it's like, "You never got all the stars in Mario 64." "Oh yes, I have." "You've never got all the Jiggies in Banjo-Kazooie." "Oh yes, I have." "You never got all the golden bananas in Donkey Kong 64." "Yeah, you're right. I didn't. I have a life.
I've done all of those things.
I'm not going to devote my entire life to fucking get on all those golden bananas. Yeesh."
Anyways, for me with the Fire Temple is that the reason I have it as my favorite is that since I played it over and over and over again, some things I'm just simply going to get desensitized to, whether I like it or not. And I know a lot of people wanted me to appreciate the Forest Temple or something, and I don't know, put the Fire Temple lower in my ranks or something. But I can't choose what's going to work for me in the long run, and just playing these games over and over again, just what's going to work for me, what isn't going to work for me. And it just so happens with the Fire Temple, even though that the music was kind of cut down, I didn't even know about that. And it just felt like a really nice place to go through, just simply. It doesn't have any puzzles, it doesn't have any big gimmicks going for it. And like what you said with the Megaton Hammer, it's used very sparingly or something. But the reason I just like the temple is that just after all of the times I played Ocarina of Time for other people, it's the most relaxing dungeon out of everything in there. That's just nice for me to go through. People can comment about all the puzzles and all the other dungeons and say, "Oh yeah, those are great." Well, and then I'll respond, "Yeah," for the first time. It's great for the puzzles, but looking past that point though, when it comes to all of the dungeons, it's going to come down to the environments and the atmosphere with the music that's just simply going to work for you.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it does, absolutely.
Yeah, so the Fire Temple, the reason I ranked it high isn't because I chose it to be. It's just something that just happened to flow down the river from the mountain, and it happened to hit this lake over here,
Oh, you and your analogies.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm chock full of them.
Oh, that's fine.
But yeah, the funny thing is, like with that same analogy though too, is that sometimes the river, it goes to the big lake or something. That's where the majority of it goes. But some opinions they happen to float over into the minority lake.
Right.
And for me, it just so happens, just after playing Ocarina of Time several times, Forest Temple, it's probably aged the worst for me out of all of the times that I played the game. And with the Fire Temple, same story. It was probably one of my more hated ones, and then I just played it over and over again, and it just crept up to be my best.
Okay.
And
we all have our own pond, and we fill it the way we like.
Yep, there's the big Grand Lake of majority of where a lot of the water has gone. That's the popular opinion, and everybody just has their own little ponds. Well, the Fire Temple, and with my views of the Forest Temple, those are my ponds.
Well said.
Alright, we have rank 22 next, which is the Tower of the Gods from Wind Waker. So, this is actually pretty interesting though, Warren, is that the first time that I actually started looking through your walkthrough of the guy and gal, it was probably around this time. I'd probably say you were still in the Forbidden Woods or something. We actually started to become friends, and I started to follow your videos closely about when it came to the Tower of the Gods or something. So, and of course you can't express your views or anything like about the dungeon, like while you're with Gal and everything. But
I try my best, but usually I can't hit all the points.
Right, because well, you have a person to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
But when it comes to the Tower of the Gods, I think musically it's okay. I think it's pretty cool to look at. I like the mini-boss a lot. But I think things like waiting for the water to rise and fall and escorting the Atlantean statues, or whatever you want to call them, is just kind of, oh, come on, let's get on with it.
Just kind of chores and out of your way.
Yeah, it kind of like puts an anchor into my little adventure. Because as soon as I went in, I'm like, ho, a dungeon that implements the boat. How interesting.
And then you go inside.
I just wait. Okay, lower, damn it.
Yeah.
Okay, much better. Well, at least I get to use the bomb aspect on the boat once. Goodbye, boat. I got to use you for a total of 2 minutes. One of those minutes, I didn't even want to use you.
Yeah, that's right. I think the biggest standout thing that about whether this dungeon kind of makes it or breaks it for most Zelda players just seems to be the music. It's just like, well, the puzzles aren't usually addressed too much. Like,
I'm okay with it, especially with those opening notes. Like, it does seem of like a holy, sacred place. And you do get that sort of Metroid Prime vibe with the atmosphere, and it is a very intense song. What I don't care for is all of the crate and lining things up with the way the water flows to open switch puzzles.
Oh my gosh.
There's 3 too many in this one.
Yeah, the worst part is just waiting for the water to
block puzzle itself, and more of, I'm not just pushing a block, I'm also waiting on the damn water.
Yeah, there's I don't know. I don't actually remember that dungeon too much, like, compared to the other dungeons. I just remember that the music...
First impressions are everything, and, like, the first 2 seconds are like, okay, but after the 5th second, you're like, ugh. And then the second half, it gets better. Like, from the point where you obtain the bow after fighting the Dark Nut, it gets a little better. It's a little more enjoyable. So I'm sort of half and half with it. There's half of it that I'm like, this is pretty good. This isn't a bad dungeon. It's okay. And then there's another half where I'm just like, get on with it. Get moving. I want to get off the boat.
Yeah. For me, the bow, it was pretty enjoyable, but you've probably seen a couple of my countdown videos when it came to, like, you know that this is my most hated dungeon from Wind Waker, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I put this at number 33. This is my 3rd worst dungeon. Is that the music? It's just I understand that a lot of Zelda players can kind of get behind it, but it's not one that I can get behind. Like, every Zelda dungeon, it has its own gimmick with the music and anything, and it just comes down to whether you like it or hate it. And it just it's not one that I can get behind at all. I actually mute my TV every time the music comes around. The bow,
I'm happy to say there's not a single dungeon where I mute my TV.
Well, good for you. Well, anyways, yeah, I thought the bow was okay, but again, it wasn't really one of my favorite items. And then the water level.
No, it wasn't so much the boat. It was not using the boat as much as you could have.
Oh, I meant the bow, not the boat.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the bow felt kind of fine or something, but it just felt like for me, he just used it for the eyes and for the whiz ropes. It didn't feel like he used it for a lot of puzzles. And then the platforming kind of bothered me in the second half of the dungeon a little bit, like timing your jumps. And then the water level gimmick, and I know we don't count the boss, but Godan wasn't very impressive to me. I just felt like he was just a ripoff from Bongo Bongo. I know he's an original boss in his own right and that he wants to test you or something, but he just was just simply a boss that didn't impress me. Just overall,
it doesn't count towards the counter, though.
Yeah. No, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. Of course not. But outside of that, just like the dungeon itself or something, this is just one of those dungeons where I just have to disagree with everybody saying what makes it so good for them. And it's not my fault or something. It's just something that...
Keep fighting on. I'm not defending this with the flaming, blazing sword.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're with me! High five. Well, I don't think that's possible.
I'm on the fence. I can still give you a high five, but I don't entirely hate it. I'm not like, I'll help you kill it. I'm more like, I respect your opinion, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. I guess giving a high five through a voiceover isn't really too possible, is it?
There we go. Insert a clap effect.
Yeah, something like
high
that.
five! There you go.
Yeah, this is just kind of like one of those dungeons I just like to forget. It's just, I liked every other dungeon in Wind Waker, but just not this one. Alright, the last rank, number 21. This one's the Skyview Temple from Skyward Sword, which is the first dungeon. And
I fairly enjoy this one. I really do. It's not your standard forest dungeon. It has beautiful music. I love the music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just walk in and it's very majestic and calming. And I know you don't like the beetle, but I'm okay with the beetle. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can get behind this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Skyward Sword has my favorite Stalfos.
Oh, yeah.
In the entire
series. For it?
Yeah, like, I feel very powerful when I'm fighting a Stalfos. But at the same time, I also feel like if I slip up, I'm as good as dead.
Yeah, doesn't he, like, knock away, like, 2 hearts if he gets slammed or something?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you only have, like, 6 hearts to start out with, so...
That's correct.
3 tries.
So, I mean, you feel like you're on an even playing field when you're fighting one of these things. It's like, I could take them down easily, but if I so much as slip up, they got me.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I liked the most about Skyward Sword's combat was how it felt like every battle was tense. I could handle this, but if I goof up, the consequence is tenfold this time.
Right.
Whereas I felt like there's more recovery in games like Twilight Princess and Wind Waker.
Except for when you jump as a wolf from a Twilight Princess, don't do that.
It depends on the enemy.
No,
If
I'm
you can
talking
latch
like
onto them, all the better.
I'm talking like if you jump from a high place from a wolf, it's an instant death.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, you like lose hearts proportion to how fast, how long you drop, and done that in a few places. It's not too good. It's not too, but I get your point though. Skyward Sword, it's very challenging with its motion controls when it comes to combat.
And like, it was a very basic dungeon, but it did implement a lot of puzzles that you really wouldn't think of. Like, it was against the Zelda norm. Like, I think I saw a friend do this. Like, he did not know about the Dizzy the Eyeball. He's like, I don't have a slingshot or a bow yet. What am I supposed to do? I'm like, you Dizzy the Eye. He's like, how was I supposed to know this?
Mario 64.
Exactly. I'm like, have you played Mario 64? I'm like, that's kind of a common trope by now.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing that reminded me when I saw that. I was like, whoa.
The beetle had good implementation. I really liked the music and the mini-boss. And once again, the enemies in Skyward Sword are puzzles in and of themselves. So even though there was a fair number of puzzles, when you got to an enemy like the Skulltula on the web, and you have to cut down the web and cut them down and then take care of them. Cool. Again, the Stalfos, wait for the right opening and then give them a good slash.
Right.
There was a lot of really cool implementations and puzzles with the Skyview Temple that it was a good opening for this is the kind of stuff you'll expect in a fully motion controlled Zelda game.
Right.
And I said, this is the framework.
This is the foundation.
Yeah, this is the foundation. We're working off this. This is the basics, which is perfect for a first dungeon.
Yeah, especially with how it incorporates its motion controls.
That's it. It implemented the motion controls and worked with them excellently. It was superb.
I don't actually hate this dungeon. Like, I have it at, I'm looking at my rank right now, which is the number 21 at the moment, which is just the rank below Dodongo's Cavern.
Well, once again, it would be higher if I included the boss, because this is one of my favorite first bosses of all time.
Yeah, Girahim.
The first fight.
But, yeah, for me personally, though, like, the reason that I didn't find the beetle so bothersome in this temple is that it wasn't used for... It was kind of the same thing like with when it comes to the Goron mines and with the magnetic boots in that respect. Is that it may have taken like a long time or something to get to places when it comes to the Goron mines. But beetle just kind of felt the same way, is that... Well, it kind of lets you breathe a little bit.
See, so I felt the beetle was a bit better because you could cancel it. Well, you can say, you know what, I don't want to go this way, I'll keep exploring. With the Goron mines, when you're in those boots, you're stuck where you are.
Okay, well, we'll get to that argument later, but... for me, like, when it comes to the beetle, though, is that, it's kind of the same thing with the Goron mines for me, is that when it comes to the beetle, it gives you breathing room. It doesn't use it, like, 100% of the time after you get it, but you use it a decent amount, and then there's a decent amount of time where you don't use it, and for that, I can give the Skyview Temple a lot of credit for that. Is that it doesn't suffocate you with this beetle or anything. I know it does it, like, throughout the game or something.
Yeah, it does throughout the game, I will agree to that, but with the Skyview, it uses it just enough to where you get enough use out of your beetle, and you don't even have to use it for the boss, because the boss is a true test of swordplay. It's saying, oh, you think you're good at the motion controls? Well, let's see what happens. And that's why I think it's a fantastic first boss, because no two players' first experience is the same.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And, the other thing, though, too, with the Skyview Temple, I have to say that, like, out of all the first dungeons, yes, even beating out Twilight Princess's Forest Temple, which is probably disappointing for you, because it's your top favorite, is that,
yeah.
I feel like with the first temple, like, when it comes to the music and the atmosphere, is that it was very haunting, like, when it came to the first impressions. It's just, like, it drops this big... large amount of instruments right on you as soon as you enter the dungeon. It's like, holy crap, am I like entering the final dungeon or something?
It was beautiful yet creepy, which is a very unusual combination. Because usually when something's creepy, it's unsettling. But this was kind of like a siren singing towards your death. Like in the old mythologies, they'd sing, and you'd get hypnotized by their voice because it was so beautiful, but really they're leading you to your death. That's what this song was like, a beautiful song, but there's a hidden danger in there.
Yeah, that's the best part about what I liked about the atmosphere with the Skyview Temple, is that there wasn't really anything calm about it. Like, it felt like you were constantly in danger, like, all the time. Like, I wouldn't call it like a scary movie type of thing, but it was one of those tones where you just can't help but take it seriously because of the music and the environment, and with all the spiders and with the beetle. It felt like a very threatening place, which is something I can give it a lot of credit for.